Obviously, Teak is back. So one of the first things he said this morning, and I love when you do this because I know you fired up about stuff, and it just makes for great dialogue, and it really packs a punch, particularly when it pertains to the NFL, given your background. He said, hey, we got to get into this Yahoo piece by Dan Wetzel because you poured through this, line by line, character by character, and you've got a lot to say. So let me I guess the broad premise here is that, according to Wetzel and many, but this is a really good piece, that Goodell's manipulation of the testimony given by Tom Brady really leaves the NFL on shaky ground and thin ice. Well, and take it from there.
Well, I was telling you that I went out to California with my brother for DraftKings to do a commercial for them. And so Rondé has obviously still in the game because he's doing color analyst work for Fox. And so he's always with these issues, and it's more front of mind than it is to us, because we're seeing it as a news report. He's seeing it as, oh, this guy said this owner said this, or this GM said this to me, and so it's a different perspective listening to Rondé talk about some of these issues, and he's been anti-Goodell from the very beginning. Now, let me preface this because of the actions that he's been taking. Forget what he's been punishing. So before we get into what we're talking about with this Dan Wetzel piece, this has nothing to do with Tom Brady, right? It does, but it doesn't.
More about the process.
I want to put that aside for a second, because whether you think he's guilty or didn't, it almost doesn't matter.
Okay.
What happened in this case was Roger Goodell hired Ted Wells to do a report. Now, we subsequently found out that NFL lawyers were working with Ted Wells to compile this report, even though it was supposed to be independent. And so the NFLPA, knowing this, because when they showed up into court, it was like, dude, you're working on both sides of this. Doesn't make sense. We want access to those records, right? We want to know what you talked about, because otherwise we don't have a fair shake at defending ourselves. The NFL says no, right? And so right after they have the appeal hearing, they put it into federal court in New York. We talked about this a week ago, where the NFLPA wanted to go to Minnesota, but the NFL had already beat them to the punch and put it in New York, and they had a judge who they thought would be favorable. And really, it's kind of simplistic. They put it in New York because they thought they'd get a judge who'd be a Giants fan or a Jets fan, or rule in favor, or supposedly rule in favor of the NFL. Unfortunately,
and by the way, and I'll certainly but the players' union wanted to go to Minnesota
because
thinking it would skew in their favor as well.
Exactly.
So let's just be fair about it all.
Of course, because they've had success there. Now, here's the thing in New York. Judges in New York, and I know this because I went through a divorce in New York, they don't want to hear frivolous stuff. Right? And so if it's frivolous, and this is kind of what this has always felt like.
Don't waste my time.
This is much ado about. Don't waste my time. Go mediate this. Go get out of court. Oh, and by the way, all those records that you said weren't going to be exposed to the NFLPA, they're now open. Nothing is sealed anymore. And so the transcript comes out, right? The transcript of Brady's appeal comes out. And here's what bothered me. As I was reading this with my brother and we were sitting in the studio, this really bothered me for the first time about Roger Goodell. In Tom Brady's transcript, he talks about talking to John Jastrzemski, who was the ball boy, who supposedly helped orchestrate the deflation of these footballs, and he explains why he was talking to him, basically saying, I wanted to know what was going on, right? We're all getting all this heat, and I want to know how these balls got deflated. How did you do this? Did someone else do this? Were you aware of this? And so all of this dialogue was happening between Tom Brady and John Jastrzemski, and that's what Roger Goodell points to as evidence that Tom Brady was manipulating something. Now, remember what Tom Brady said. I was talking to John Jastrzemski to figure out what happened in the AFC Championship game to those footballs. You fast forward to the appeal. Roger Goodell rules, without even really considering the evidence that was given to him or what Tom Brady said. He rules that his suspension is upheld, right? And in his statement, he basically says Tom Brady only talked to Jastrzemski about the Super Bowl footballs, which is a blatant and obvious lie. Now, let's go back a little bit to Ray Rice. When Ray Rice had this altercation with his girlfriend in an elevator that we saw the video of. And the story then was that Roger Goodell is saying, I didn't ever see the video. I had no idea that this actually happened. Now, because of what just came out with this Tom Brady thing and Deflategate, it now questions me whether or not Roger Goodell was lying to save his ass then, too. And so for a long time, I wanted to be behind Roger Goodell. I wanted to say, I understand this is a no-win situation. You're not used to handling these things, but I feel like he's lying and he's compromising himself. And I wonder if this is worth his job. And now I'm saying he has probably compromised his job.